Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Scholar. Somewhere in your home tonight, or perhaps right beside you, there may be a small animal curled into a loaf, breathing slow, twitching now and then at some private dream. And inside that dream, more often than you might expect, is a hunt. Here is the strange truth we will spend the next couple of hours wandering through together. Every house cat on earth, even the softest, laziest, most thoroughly spoiled one, still carries the complete machinery of a predator. The crouch, the twitching tail, the stillness before the pounce. All of it intact, inherited, ready. And yet most modern cats will live their entire lives without ever needing to catch a single meal for themselves. Food arrives in a bowl. The mice that once justified this whole partnership between our two species have, in most homes, quietly disappeared. So what happens to an instinct when the world stops asking anything of it? Tonight, that is the question we will follow. Gently, the way you might follow a cat down an unfamiliar hallway. We will drift back to the first grain stores of the ancient world, where a wild, solitary hunter first decided that humans might be useful neighbors. We will slip inside the nervous system itself, into laboratories where scientists once discovered that a cat's desire to kill and a cat's desire to eat are, strangely, two separate things entirely. We will watch kittens 4 weeks old take their very first lesson from a mother who still remembers how this is done. We will feel the world through a whisker. We will even, for a little while, see the whole story from the mouse's side. And near the end, we will sit with the quiet, almost impossible fact that the animal asleep in your lap shares the vast majority of its genetic blueprint with a tiger. If gentle, curious journeys like this one help you drift off, I would love it if you considered subscribing or leaving a thought below about the cat in your own life, past or present. It helps this small channel find its way to other sleepy minds. For now, though, there is nothing you need to do. Let your shoulders soften into whatever is holding you. Let your breathing slow, unhurried, unwatched. Let your eyes rest, even if they are already closed. There is nowhere else you need to be tonight. Let's begin, quietly, at the beginning of the hunt. Part 1. The Sleeping Hunter Beside You. Fact 1. The hunter who never has to hunt. Fact 1. Picture an ordinary house cat, orange, black, tabby, it does not matter, dozing on a windowsill in the afternoon sun. Nothing about that scene looks dangerous, and yet, biologically, that sleeping animal is a fully equipped predator, no different in its wiring from the wild cats that once stalked the deserts of the Near East. Every muscle built for the ambush is still there, the retractable claws, the forward-facing eyes for judging distance, the spine that coils and releases like a spring. None of it has gone anywhere. Think of it a little like keeping a beautifully tuned instrument in a closet. It is complete, ready, capable of the music it was built for. It simply never gets played. Most house cats today will live out their entire lives, from that first wobbling kitten step to their last stretch in a sunny spot, without ever needing to catch a single meal on their own. There is something quietly moving about that. An entire toolkit, shaped over millions of years for a single purpose, carried gently through a life that no longer requires it. But if the need for hunting has vanished, Why does the instinct remain so stubbornly intact? And where exactly did this strange arrangement between cats and humans even begin? Fact 2. Not hunger, but something else entirely. Fact 2. That question about instinct leads somewhere unexpected, into a finding that surprised even the scientists who first documented it. In the late 1970s, a researcher named Maxine Beeben sat and carefully observed cats in the presence of live prey, testing exactly what conditions made a cat decide to kill. What she found overturned the simple assumption that cats hunt because they are hungry. Hunger, it turned out, was not a necessary condition for killing at all. A cat that had already eaten a full meal could still stalk, pounce, and kill with the same focused intensity as one that had not eaten in a day. Think of it like the difference between eating because your body needs fuel and cooking because you love the process of cooking itself. For a cat, hunting appears to run on its own separate motivation, only loosely connected to the stomach. This single finding quietly reshapes everything we think we know about the well-fed housecat pouncing on a moth at midnight. She is not confused about her next meal. She is simply doing what the deepest layer of her mind was built to do. So if hunger is not the switch that turns hunting on, what is? Fact 3. A delicate negotiation. Fact 3. Beeben's research did not stop at proving hunger irrelevant to the urge to hunt. She went further and found something more delicate. Hunger changes the odds without ever being the deciding vote. When a cat was hungrier, the probability of an actual kill rose. When the prey was large, or fighting back, or simply difficult, that probability fell, almost regardless of hunger. And in the in-between cases, when a cat was only moderately interested and the prey was only moderately difficult, something curious happened. The cat would often play with the prey first, before killing it, or after, or sometimes instead of ever killing it at all. Imagine a scale with hunger sitting on one side and difficulty sitting on the other, gently tipping back and forth, deciding in real time whether tonight ends in a kill or a long, strange, almost thoughtful game. This is likely the true origin of that behavior every cat owner has puzzled over. The swat, the release, the pounce again. Not cruelty, not confusion, but a finely balanced negotiation happening somewhere just beneath the surface of a very old brain. And that negotiation, it turns out, begins to form long before a cat ever meets a real mouse at all. Fact 4. A kitten crouches at prey it has never seen. Fact 4. Here is one of the strangest, most tender facts in this entire story. A kitten that has never once encountered a real mouse, that has spent its whole short life indoors on soft blankets, will still crouch low, wiggle its hindquarters, and pounce on a piece of string dragged across the floor. Researchers studying kitten development in the late 1970s and early 80s, tracking young cats week by week from 4 weeks old to 12, documented this precisely. The motor patterns of stalking, chasing, and pouncing appear on a fairly fixed timetable, whether or not a kitten has ever been exposed to prey at all. It is a little like how a human infant does not need to be taught to grasp a finger placed in its palm. The wiring arrives pre-installed, waiting only for a world to practice on. And practice on it they do. A wiggling shoelace becomes a fleeing rodent. A sibling's twitching tail becomes something to stalk. The instinct does not wait for permission from experience. It simply switches on, gently, right on schedule, in kitten after kitten after kitten, all over the world. But knowing the motions of a hunt, we will soon learn, is a very different thing from succeeding at one. Fact 5. Instinct is not the same thing as skill. Fact 5. This is where the story quietly turns, because having the instinct and having the skill are not the same thing at all, and the gap between them explains almost everything else we will explore tonight. Researchers who studied cats into adulthood found something specific and a little humbling. A cat that had experience catching mice as a kitten became genuinely skilled at catching mice, but that skill barely transferred anywhere else. A cat raised on mice was not automatically good at catching birds or rats or anything unfamiliar. The learning was narrow, tied closely to the exact kind of prey a cat had practiced on. Think of it like a person who has only ever driven an automatic car. Give them the same basic instinct to drive, the same working knowledge of a road, and sit them in front of a manual transmission for the first time, and suddenly none of that confidence transfers cleanly. So the crouch, the pounce, the readiness, all of it is inherited. But turning that readiness into an actual, reliable catch, again and again, against a fast and unpredictable target, requires something instinct alone cannot provide. It requires practice against the real thing. And for most cats living now, that real thing has become almost impossible to find. Fact 6. Most cats today catch little or nothing at all. Fact 6. Here is a number that quietly reframes the entire question behind tonight's journey. Across multiple studies of cats with outdoor access, researchers have found the same pattern again and again. Most domestic cats catch few prey animals, or none at all, over the course of a year. Only a smaller group of cats turn out to be genuinely prolific hunters, responsible for the vast majority of catches within any given cat population. In other words, the picture of the cat as a constant, efficient killing machine was never quite accurate, not even before modern life changed everything. Hunting success, even among cats with real opportunity, has always been unevenly distributed. Picture a neighborhood full of cats, all carrying the same inherited toolkit, and yet only a handful of them ever actually bringing something home. The rest simply do not. Not because they lack the instinct, but because catching a fast, alert, evasive animal has always been harder than the crouch and the pounce make it look. This unevenness will matter again later in our journey, when we meet the individual cats who break every rule of what a hunter is supposed to be. For now, though, we should ask a gentler question. What exactly makes a real mouse so much harder to catch than a toy? Fact 7. A toy holds still for a lesson. A real mouse won't. Fact 7. A toy mouse, dragged slowly across a living room floor, will always move exactly as predictably as the hand holding it. A real mouse never will. Scientists who studied object play in adult cats found that toys work best when they are small, roughly the size of an actual mouse, textured like fur or feathers, and kept in motion. But they also found something else. Cats habituate astonishingly fast. Play with the very same unchanging toy for just a few minutes and interest collapses almost completely. Swap it for a toy of a different color or texture, though, and the intensity returns almost instantly, sometimes even stronger than before. It is a little like the difference between a well-rehearsed piece of theater and an unpredictable live conversation. One follows a script a cat can master through repetition. The other adjusts, reacts, and surprises every single time. A living, breathing mouse changes direction mid-stride, freezes without warning, uses shadows and gaps a toy never needs to think about. No amount of pouncing on string quite prepares a claw for that. So even a cat that plays beautifully, night after night, might still find the real version of that game far harder than anyone watching from the couch would ever guess. Fact 8. The gift that was never really a gift. Fact 8. Almost anyone who has lived with an outdoor cat knows this scene. You open the back door, and there, on the mat, is an unmistakable, slightly grim little gift. For a long time, people assumed this behavior meant something almost touching, that a cat was providing for an inadequate human family member, gently making up for our own uselessness at hunting. The truth researchers have gathered is a little different and honestly just as touching in its own way. A cat's home is where she feels safest, where she can eat undisturbed without another animal stealing her catch. Bringing prey inside is less a gift and more a kind of relocation to a secure vault. And there is a small, almost funny detail buried in this research. Once safely home, some cats catch the scent of their own regular food waiting nearby and simply abandon the prey entirely, wandering off toward the bowl instead. The freshly caught mouse, so hard-won just minutes earlier, loses out to a meal that requires no chase at all. It is a strange little collision of two separate systems, the instinct to hunt and secure a catch, and the simple, practical pull of an easier meal close by. And that collision, in miniature, is really the story of the modern house cat entire. Fact 9. One question. This whole hunt turns on. Fact 9. Somewhere in every population of house cats, you will find two very different animals wearing the same species. One cat sees a mouse dart along the baseboard and is instantly transformed, utterly focused, coiled, and ready within a heartbeat. Another cat, watching the exact same mouse cross the exact same room, will simply lift its head, blink once, slowly, and look away, as though the matter belongs to someone else's job description entirely. Both cats carry the same ancestry. Both were built by the same evolutionary process, and yet their responses to an identical opportunity could not be more different. It is a little like two people raised in the same family, given the same lessons, who grow up to care about entirely different things. Something in temperament, in early experience, in whatever subtle mixture makes one individual different from another, tips the balance one way or the other. We will spend real time with this question later in our journey, sitting with the research on exactly why some cats become relentless specialists and others remain gently, permanently uninterested. For now, it is enough to simply notice it. The instinct is universal, but the willingness to use it is anything but. Fact 10. Back to the beginning of the bargain. Fact 10. So we are left, At the close of this first quiet chapter, with a small mystery sitting gently in our laps, an instinct fully intact, a skill unevenly distributed, a modern world that asks almost nothing of either one. To understand how we arrived here, we have to go back, far further than any living memory, to a time before cats slept on beds at all, before there were beds to sleep on. We have to go back to the first grain stores of the ancient world, to the moment a wild, solitary hunter first noticed that human settlements meant something worth staying for. It was not humans who decided to tame the cat. If anything, as we are about to discover, it may have been the other way around entirely. Let the room grow a little quieter now, and let your thoughts drift backward with us, past the sofa, past the house, past the last few hundred years, all the way to the edge of the first wheat field the world ever grew. Part 2. A Truce Built on Grain. Fact 11. The mouse arrived first. Fact 11. To understand how a wild hunter ended up asleep on a pillow, we have to start somewhere unexpected, not with the cat at all, but with the mouse. Long before anyone stored a single seed of grain, house mice had already begun drifting toward human camps. Archaeological evidence from the Near East shows these early mice moving in around 14,500 years ago, drawn simply by shelter from the weather, protection from other predators, and the occasional dropped scrap of food. This was 2,000 years before anyone in that region began storing grain at all. Think of it like a quiet, patient scout arriving at a campsite long before the rest of the group even knows it exists. The mouse found human company useful first. Everything else, the grain stores, the wildcats, the entire ancient partnership we are about to trace, only followed after. It is strange to think that the story of the housecat does not begin with a cat's decision at all. It begins with a much smaller creature, quietly testing whether it was safe to live beside us. And once that small test succeeded, the rest of the story became almost inevitable. Fact 12. Grain meant mice, and mice meant cats. Fact 12. Once early farmers in the Fertile Crescent began storing large amounts of grain, that patient population of mice finally had exactly what it had been waiting for. At sites like Jerf El Ahmar and Netiv Hagdud, archaeologists have found the earliest evidence of house mice thriving directly alongside human grain stores, dated to roughly 12,000 years ago. And where mice gather in numbers, a solitary territorial wildcat, the ancestor of every housecat alive today, would have taken notice. These wildcats began venturing closer to human settlements than their instincts might otherwise have allowed, drawn by a food source that essentially delivered itself. Picture a lit porch light on a summer night, and the insects it draws in, and then the spider who quietly builds a web nearby to take advantage of the crowd. The wildcat was that spider, positioning itself wherever the easiest opportunity had already gathered. Nobody invited the cat in, it simply followed the food, the way any good hunter would. But somewhere in that slow, cautious approach, something more permanent began to take root. Fact 13. A cat buried like family. Fact 13. On the island of Cyprus, archaeologists uncovered something remarkable. A cat, deliberately buried close beside a human, in a grave dated to roughly 9,500 years ago. What makes this so significant is a small geographic detail. Cyprus is an island, and it never had a native population of wildcats. For a cat to be there at all, someone must have carried it across the water, almost certainly on purpose. This is widely considered some of the earliest evidence that humans were not just tolerating cats nearby, but actively choosing to keep them close, perhaps even valuing them enough to take one on a sea crossing. Imagine packing for a long, uncertain voyage to a new island and choosing, among your limited and precious cargo, to bring along a cat. That is not indifference. That is a relationship already forming. It would still be thousands of years before cats looked anything like the animals we know today. But in that quiet grave on Cyprus, something had clearly already shifted, from a wild opportunist tolerated at the edges of a village into a companion worth carrying across the sea. Fact 14. One bloodline, traced through every housecat. Fact 14. Every housecat alive today, from the sleekest show breed to the scruffiest alley cat, carries genetic traces back to the same wild ancestor, a subspecies known as the Near Eastern wildcat. Genetic studies of mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed quietly from mother to offspring, revealed two major maternal lineages, accounting for most of the world's domestic cat population, both tracing back to this one wild subspecies. From its origins somewhere in the Near East, that bloodline spread outward through Anatolia and into Europe, carried gradually along the same routes that carried early farmers and their crops. It is a little like discovering that nearly every voice in a vast, sprawling choir can be traced back through generations to just one original singer, whose descendants simply kept spreading the song outward, farther and farther from home. Every purr on every windowsill tonight, every stretch, every twitch of a sleeping paw is a small, living echo of that one ancient bloodline, still carried forward after all this time. But that bloodline, we are about to discover, was not spreading through only one part of the world. Fact 15. A second story unfolding in China. Fact 15. Here is a lesser-known thread in this story, one that unfolded almost entirely independently, on the opposite side of the ancient world. At an early farming village called Quanhuchun, in what is now Shanxi, China, archaeologists uncovered cat remains dating back roughly 5,300 years. Chemical analysis of the bones told a striking story. Both the local rodents and the cats had eaten large amounts of millet, the very crop the village depended on, showing that cats there were preying specifically on the rodents that threatened the harvest, just as their distant cousins were doing in the Fertile Crescent, thousands of miles away and thousands of years apart in cultural development. Think of two separate kitchens on opposite ends of the world, arriving independently at the exact same useful recipe without ever comparing notes. Two very different farming societies, unaware of one another, seem to have discovered the same quiet solution to the same quiet problem, almost as if the presence of stored grain simply summons a cat into existence, wherever in the world that grain happens to be kept. Fact 16. The cat that was fed, not the one that fed itself. Fact 16. Among the cats found at that Chinese farming village, one individual stood out in a way that quietly complicates the whole heroic image of the self-sufficient hunter. Its bones showed an unusually high amount of millet in its diet, far more plant material than a strict hunter should ever have consumed, and a low overall intake of meat. Researchers studying the remains suggested this particular cat likely survived by scavenging leftover human food, or perhaps was even deliberately fed. And this cat, unlike many of the others, lived to a notably old age. Picture the difference between a stray who wins over a neighborhood through hunting skill alone and one who simply figures out which house always has scraps by the back step and settles there instead, living a longer, softer life for the choice. It is a small, almost funny detail buried in 5,000-year-old bone chemistry, but it tells us something important. Even at the very beginning of this relationship, not every cat needed to be a great hunter to thrive. Some simply needed to be liked. Fact 17. Sailors' best-kept secret weapon. Fact 17. As trade networks expanded across the ancient Mediterranean, cats found an entirely new kind of grain store to guard: the cargo hold of a ship. Genetic evidence shows that cats descended from Egyptian populations spread rapidly along ancient marine trade routes, protecting stored food from rodents during long voyages. Centuries later, Viking longships carried cats of that same Egyptian ancestry astonishingly far from home, all the way to what is now northern Germany. A creature that began its journey guarding grain in the Fertile Crescent eventually found itself standing watch over the hull of a ship built by an entirely different civilization, thousands of years and thousands of miles removed from where the story began. Imagine a single quiet skill, catching rodents in tight, enclosed spaces, proving so consistently useful that it earns passage on every kind of vessel, across every sea, for every culture that ever needed to protect a food supply. The cat did not conquer the world by force. It simply became indispensable. One ship, one harvest, one grain store at a time. Fact 18. Cats that barely changed at all. Fact 18. Unlike dogs, who were reshaped almost beyond recognition by thousands of years of selective breeding, cats spent most of their shared history with humans looking remarkably like their wild ancestors. Genetic analysis shows that for the majority of this long relationship, domestic cats kept the same gray striped coat pattern as their wildcat ancestors. Deliberately bred coat colors and patterns, the tortoise shells, the solid whites, the many varieties we recognize instantly today, did not really begin appearing in large numbers until the Middle Ages in Europe, thousands of years after cats had already settled comfortably into human life. It is a little like a guest who moves into your home and stays for centuries, all the while keeping their own clothes, their own habits, their own quiet independence, never quite becoming a different person just because the address changed. Cats, it seems, joined human life almost entirely on their own terms, and in many ways, as we are about to see, they still do. Fact 19. A deal of tolerance, not domestication. Fact 19. If there is one phrase that captures the true nature of this ancient arrangement, researchers studying cat genetics have suggested it themselves. For the longest stretch of shared history, the relationship between cats and humans was best described as mutual tolerance rather than true domestication. Unlike sheep, cattle, or horses, animals that humans actively bred, managed, and controlled for specific purposes, early cats were mostly left to make their own choices. They chose to stay near human settlements because the hunting was good. Humans, in turn, simply chose not to chase them away because the pest control was appreciated. Think of it less like a partnership formally agreed upon and more like two independent neighbors, each quietly benefiting from the other's presence, neither one ever really asking permission. That independence, gently inherited across thousands of years, may be exactly what still lingers in the house cat sleeping somewhere near you tonight. Not owned, not truly tamed, so much as choosing, again and again, generation after generation, to stay. Fact 20, but the story was just getting started. Fact 20. For a long time, scientists believed this was more or less the whole story. Wild cats drawn to grain, slowly settling into human life, spreading gradually outward until they became the cats we know today. But in recent years, a handful of new genetic studies have complicated that comfortable timeline in a way nobody quite expected. Ancient cat bones, once assumed to be early domestic cats, have turned out, on closer genetic inspection, to be something else entirely. The process, it now seems, was slower, stranger, and far less certain than anyone had guessed. Imagine reading the final chapter of a book you thought you already understood, only to discover an entirely new twist folded quietly into the ending. Let your breathing settle a little deeper now as we drift further into that surprising twist, into a version of this ancient story that even the researchers themselves did not expect to find. Part 3. A truce that took longer than we thought. Fact 21. A population that almost made it and didn't. Fact 21. In China, there was another wild cat entirely, one that came remarkably close to walking the same path as the house cat, and then simply turned around. Researchers studying ancient DNA found that Asian leopard cats lived alongside Chinese farming settlements for an astonishing 3,500 years, close enough for their bones to turn up again and again at archaeological sites. And yet, after all that time in close proximity to humans, the relationship never took hold. One of the scientists involved in the study described these leopard cats bluntly, calling them, with clear affection, nasty little kitties, wild, sharp-tempered, never quite willing to soften. Picture a long, patient courtship that simply never resulted in a marriage. 35 centuries of proximity that somehow never became partnership. Eventually, the leopard cats drifted back into the wild landscapes they had come from, leaving almost no genetic trace in the cats that live in Chinese homes today. Domestication, it turns out, was never guaranteed. It could just as easily have not happened at all. Fact 22. Why the leopard cats walked away. Fact 22. So what made one wild cat lineage choose humans permanently, while another spent millennia nearby and ultimately chose to leave? Researchers suspect the leopard cat's retreat may be tied to a shifting climate, which altered farming patterns and population density in the region, a couple of centuries before the leopard cats disappeared from human settlements entirely. As food availability around those villages changed, The fragile advantage of staying close to people may simply have thinned away to nothing. It is a little like a friendship that quietly fades not through any single argument, but through slowly changing circumstances, until one day the two parties simply stop finding reasons to stay in each other's company. Today, the descendants of those leopard cats still exist, living, as one researcher beautifully put it, as elusive and hidden neighbors, present in the landscape but almost entirely unseen. A domestication story that came remarkably close and then quietly, without any single dramatic moment, walked itself back into the forest. Fact 23. The cat that actually stayed. Fact 23. If the leopard cats did not become China's house cats, then where did China's modern house cats actually come from? The answer arrived along one of history's most famous trade routes. Genetic evidence suggests that the true ancestors of today's domestic cats in China arrived far more recently than anyone expected, traveling the Silk Road from the Near East roughly 1,400 years ago. These were not descendants of the local leopard cats at all, but newcomers, carrying that same familiar Near Eastern bloodline we traced earlier in our journey, arriving by caravan rather than by ancient proximity. Picture two very different roads to the same destination. One, thousands of years of slow, local familiarity that never quite closed the distance. The other, a single, confident journey along a trade route, arriving with everything already settled. It is a strange thought to sit with. The cats curled up in homes across China today are, genetically speaking, closer to a traveler who simply arrived one day, already comfortable, already willing to stay. Fact 24. A surprise waiting inside ancient Turkish bones. Fact 24. Meanwhile, back in the region where this whole story is thought to have begun, a separate discovery was quietly rewriting the timeline all over again. Scientists analyzing the full nuclear genome, not just the smaller trace of maternal DNA studied in earlier research, of ancient cats found in Neolithic Turkey, expected to confirm what everyone already believed, that these very early cats, living close to some of the world's first farming villages, were already domesticated. Instead, the genetic analysis revealed something nobody anticipated. These cats were genetically pure wildcat, almost entirely unchanged from their wild ancestors, despite living near human settlements for thousands of years. Think of it like finally reading a private letter you always assumed said one thing, only to discover its true contents were something else entirely. These ancient cats had proximity to humans without yet having the deeper transformation. They were neighbors, not partners, still fundamentally wild, in ways their bones alone could never have revealed. Fact 25. How late true domestication might really be. Fact 25. Taken together, these two discoveries, the leopard cats of China and the surprisingly wild cats of ancient Turkey, point toward a genuinely startling possibility. True domestication of the cat, the deep genetic shift researchers can actually measure, may have occurred and spread far later than almost anyone believed, possibly as recently as 2,000 years ago. For thousands of years before that, cats and humans lived side by side, tolerating one another, benefiting from one another, without the cat itself ever fully crossing the invisible line that separates a wild animal from a truly domesticated one. It is a little like discovering that two neighbors who seemed to have known each other for a lifetime had actually only become close friends quite recently, all those earlier years having been polite, useful, but genuinely distant. The bond we assume is ancient may be, in genetic terms, remarkably young. Fact 26. A younger companion than we assumed. Fact 26. To really feel the weight of that timeline, it helps to place it beside a familiar comparison. Dogs have shared a deep, genetically transformed relationship with humans for close to 11,000 years. If true cat domestication only took hold around 2,000 years ago, that makes the house cat, in relative terms, a remarkably recent arrival at the family table, despite all those thousands of years of loose, casual proximity that came before it. Imagine two guests at the same long dinner party. One arrived at the very beginning of the evening and has been sitting comfortably ever since. The other lingered near the door for hours, chatting politely from a distance, and only recently pulled up a chair and truly joined the table. The cat sleeping near you tonight may be, genetically, one of the newest members of the household species humans have ever welcomed in, and that youth, as we are about to discover, may explain quite a lot about the instincts still humming quietly underneath the surface. Fact 27. Why this story was so hard to find. Fact 27. It is worth pausing to ask why it took scientists so long to notice any of this, given how much attention cats have always received. Part of the answer is simply physical. Cat bones are small and delicate, easily lost or overlooked at archaeological sites, and unlike cattle or pigs, cats were not eaten, so their remains rarely ended up in the food waste piles archaeologists often rely on for evidence. But there is a deeper reason too. The very first signs of domestication in any species tend to be behavioral or cosmetic: a new tolerance for humans, a new coat color, changes that leave no mark on a skeleton at all. It is a little like trying to date the beginning of a friendship using only photographs of empty chairs. The most important evidence, the warmth, the trust, the changing behavior, simply never survives in the form researchers can dig up. Fortunately, a newer kind of evidence was about to make all of this visible for the very first time. Fact 28. A genome more honest than a grave. Fact 28. That newer evidence came from a shift in the technology itself. For years, most ancient cat genetics relied on mitochondrial DNA, the small, easily preserved genetic material passed only from mother to offspring. It is useful but incomplete, like reading only one branch of an enormous family tree. Recent studies were finally able to sequence full nuclear genomes from ancient cat remains instead, the complete genetic blueprint inherited from both parents. This fuller picture is what allowed researchers to discover that those Neolithic Turkish cats were genetically pure wildcat, a distinction the older, narrower method could never have revealed clearly. Think of it like finally being handed the entire manuscript of a story, after years of only ever reading a single summarized chapter. With this fuller genetic picture in hand, scientists are only now beginning to understand a story that has been quietly waiting, unread, in ancient bones for thousands of years. Fact 29. Still mostly wild, even now. Fact 29. Here is where this entire historical detour quietly circles back to the very first mystery of tonight's journey. If true genetic domestication only took hold within the last 2,000 years, rather than across the 10 or 12,000 years cats have loosely lived near humans, then cats have simply had far less evolutionary time than dogs to have their wild instincts bred away. Dogs were shaped deliberately and continuously for thousands of years longer. Cats, for most of their shared history with us, were largely left to remain exactly what they already were. Picture a wild river that has only recently had a single small dam built across it. The water may look calmer near the surface, but underneath, the original current is still moving with nearly its full original force. This may be the deepest reason the instinct we explored back in part 1 remains so fully intact. Cats were never given enough time or enough pressure to become anything other than what they always were underneath. Fact 30. Into the brain itself. Fact 30. So if that wild current is still running just beneath the surface, the next honest question becomes, where exactly does it live? Not out in some ancient grain store, not in a genome we can only read after the fact, but right now, inside the living body of the cat, curled up somewhere nearby tonight. To answer that, we have to go somewhere far smaller and far stranger than any archaeological site. We have to go inside the brain itself, into the quiet, electrical machinery that decides, moment to moment, whether a swaying curtain becomes nothing at all or becomes something worth catching. Let your body settle a little further into stillness now, as we drift from the outside history of the cat into the deep, private wiring of its mind. Part 4. The Machine Beneath the Fur. 2. Fact 31. A behavior built from separate parts. Fact 31. Here is something that might surprise you. A cat's hunt is not really one single instinct at all. It is a chain of separate stages, each one controlled by its own piece of neural machinery, capable of running smoothly together, or, as scientists have discovered, capable of being pulled apart and studied in isolation. Researchers who study the cat's predatory sequence describe it in distinct phases. First comes the motivational phase, the interest, the approach, the crouch, the stalk. Then comes the executory phase, the actual killing bite, followed by consuming the prey. These are not simply two halves of the same reflex. They are separately controlled systems that happen almost all of the time to fire in the correct order, one smoothly handing off to the next. Think of it like a small, elegant machine made of several independent gears, each one built for a single task, all of them ordinarily turning together in perfect sequence. Ordinarily, but scientists eventually found a way to interrupt that sequence, and in doing so, they revealed something remarkable about what lies underneath it. Fact 32. The drug that turned on a switch. Fact 32. In a study from the 1980s, researchers gave a particular antidepressant medication to a group of cats already known as reliable non-killers, animals that, despite every opportunity, had simply never shown interest in killing prey before. What happened next surprised even the scientists conducting the experiment. Under the medication, 6 out of 10 of these previously indifferent cats suddenly began stalking, catching, and killing prey, seemingly for the very first time in their lives. More strikingly, this new behavior did not fade once the drug wore off. In several cats, the newly activated predatory attack continued to appear in later sessions, sometimes for months after the treatment had ended entirely. It is a little like discovering a locked door in a house you thought you knew completely, and finding that, once opened even briefly, it simply refuses to close again. Something had clearly been present the entire time, fully formed, simply waiting for the right key. Fact 33. A perfectly executed move, never practiced. Fact 33. What makes this finding even stranger is how the newly activated cats actually performed their very first kill. Researchers noted that the killing grip in these cats with no prior hunting history at all, was in every case perfectly performed, directed precisely to the nape of the prey's neck, delivered with exactly enough force to end things quickly. There was no clumsy trial and error, no fumbling first attempt the way a beginner at almost any other skill might stumble through. Imagine picking up a musical instrument you have genuinely never played before and performing a complex piece flawlessly on the very first try, as though your hands already somehow remembered a lesson you were never taught. This is strong evidence that the physical mechanics of the kill are not learned behavior at all, but a complete, pre-wired motor program sitting dormant in the nervous system, ready to run correctly the very first moment it is finally called upon. Fact 34. Some cats simply never will. Fact 34. Not every cat in that same study responded to the medication at all. 4 out of 10 of the previously non-killing cats never began hunting, no matter how long the treatment continued. Researchers have long noted that a small percentage of cats appear to be what scientists somewhat bluntly call genetic non-killers, individuals in whom the predatory pattern, for reasons still not fully understood, simply does not activate, even under circumstances that reliably trigger it in almost every other cat. Think of it like a small percentage of people who, no matter the encouragement, the training, or the opportunity, simply never develop an interest in a particular sport or skill that comes naturally to nearly everyone else around them. This is one of the earliest and clearest scientific hints of something we will return to later in far more detail. Individuality in cats runs so deep, it appears to be written directly into the wiring of the brain itself. Fact 35. Wanting to hunt is not the same as being able to finish. Fact 35. A separate line of research used a different compound entirely, one that blocks specific receptors in the brain, to ask a more precise question: which part of the hunt actually depends on which part of the mind? When cats were given this compound, something very specific happened. Their interest in prey remained completely intact. They still approached, still stalked, still pursued, exactly as before. But the final killing bite became disrupted and clumsy, and afterward, the cats were almost entirely unable to properly consume what they had caught. It is a little like watching someone who still deeply wants to finish a difficult task, who still shows up, still tries, still cares, but whose hands, for reasons beyond their control, simply will not complete the final motion required. Wanting to hunt, it turns out, and being physically able to finish the hunt, live in genuinely different corners of a cat's nervous system. Fact 36. the bite that was built by the jaw, not the mind. Fact 36. So what exactly was being disrupted in those cats, if not their desire to hunt at all? The answer, researchers concluded, involved a very specific brain chemical system connected to the fine sensory motor control of jaw movement, the precise, coordinated motion required to deliver an effective killing bite and then properly chew and swallow. When that particular chemical pathway was blocked, the broader hunting drive stayed completely online, but the physical execution of the mouth itself became unreliable. Picture a skilled surgeon whose intention, focus, and desire to complete an operation remain entirely intact, while a small tremor in the hand alone prevents the final, most delicate motion from succeeding. The hunt, in other words, is not steered by one single unified command from the brain. It depends on several distinct systems, each handling its own small, essential piece of a much larger performance. Fact 37. Hunting runs on its own reward. Fact 37. Here is a detail that helps explain why cats often seem to genuinely enjoy the process of hunting itself, independent of whatever they might eat afterward. Researchers studying the neural circuits behind predatory behavior in cats have connected it to the brain's positive reward system, the same broad category of circuitry involved in pleasure and motivation more generally. In more direct terms, several scientists have described predatory behavior in cats as hedonistic, meaning it appears to be rewarding to the cat in its own right, not simply a means to the end of a meal. Think of it a little like the difference between eating a meal purely for nutrition and savoring the entire experience of preparing a favorite dish, the process itself carrying its own quiet pleasure, separate from anything to do with hunger. This may be the deepest biological reason a perfectly well-fed housecat can still seem so genuinely delighted by a wind-up toy skittering across the floor. Fact 38. Not the same violence as a rat's. Fact 38. It would be easy to assume that all predatory killing across the animal kingdom works roughly the same way in the brain. Researchers who have compared cats directly to rats found this assumption to be false. In rats, a related behavior called mouse killing is understood to be closely tied to the brain's aggression circuitry, and only a small fraction of rats naturally display it at all. In cats, though, predatory behavior turned out to run largely independently of aggressive or defensive behavior, controlled by its own distinct motivational system, and expressed far more consistently across the species as a whole. It is a little like discovering that two very different animals, despite both being described with the same word, hunting, are actually running two almost entirely different pieces of internal software to get there. A cat's calm, focused pursuit of a moving light on the floor is simply not built from the same neural material as raw aggression at all. Fact 39. Even a toy must seem to die. Fact 39. This deep, separate reward system helps explain a small but telling detail researchers have noticed about which toys hold a cat's attention the longest. Toys that visibly change during play, ones that tear slightly, lose feathers, or shift shape under a cat's claws, tend to stay engaging far longer than toys that remain perfectly, unchangingly intact. Researchers believe this is because physical damage to a toy closely mimics the sensory experience of a genuine kill, quietly satisfying the same executory circuitry we have been exploring tonight. Picture the difference between rehearsing a performance in front of a mirror that never changes and rehearsing in front of one that visibly responds and shifts with every movement you make. Even a simple toy, in other words, becomes more satisfying the more convincingly it can pretend, for just a moment, to have actually been caught. Fact 40. A system waiting to be practiced. Fact 40. So we now understand something important. A cat's brain arrives already carrying a complete, functioning hunting system, built in separate, cooperating parts, rewarding in its own right, fully formed before any real experience has ever touched it. But a fully wired system is not quite the same as a fully practiced one. Somewhere between birth and adulthood, this entire elegant machine has to be gently switched on, tested, refined, and shaped into something a cat can actually rely on. And that process, it turns out, begins astonishingly early, guided patiently by the one figure every kitten trusts completely, its mother. Let your thoughts settle now, soft and unhurried, as we travel back to the very beginning of a single kitten's life, 4 weeks old, eyes barely adjusted to the light, about to receive its very first lesson in the oldest skill its family has ever known. Part 5. How a Kitten Learns to Kill. Fact 41. The first lesson comes from mother. Fact 41. Long before a kitten ever meets a mouse on its own terms, it meets one through its mother, carefully, deliberately, on her schedule rather than its own. Among free-living cats, researchers have observed that a mother begins bringing prey back to her kittens at around 4 weeks of age. At first, she brings it already dead, simply introducing the shape, the scent, the texture of what a meal is supposed to look like. Only later does she begin bringing live prey, releasing it gently at the nest, giving her kittens their very first real opportunity to practice the hunt for themselves under her watchful supervision. Think of it like a parent who first shows a child a photograph of a task before ever handing them the real tools, easing them forward one careful step at a time. It is a small, patient curriculum, written nowhere, taught by instinct alone, passed from one generation of mothers to the next, likely for as long as cats have existed at all. Fact 42. A demonstration before the practice. Fact 42. In those earliest stages, a mother does something even more remarkable than simply providing opportunity. She often demonstrates the hunt itself, performing the stalk, the pounce, the kill, directly in front of her watching kittens. Cats, it turns out, are excellent observational learners. Researchers have found that both kittens and adult cats can learn entirely new, unfamiliar tasks simply by watching another cat perform them, without ever needing to be physically guided through the motion themselves. This ability likely exists precisely because hunting is too important a skill to leave entirely to trial and error. A kitten that learns quickly by watching survives more reliably than one that must discover everything alone. Picture a small classroom with only one student and one teacher, the lesson repeated patiently, over and over, until the exact rhythm of the movement has quietly settled into memory. Long before a kitten catches anything at all, it has already been watching, closely, carefully, absorbing far more than anyone observing from a distance might ever guess. Fact 43. Learning a taste before learning a skill. Fact 43. Here is something that quietly reshapes how we think about a cat's preferences later in life. Kittens do not simply learn how to hunt from their mother. They also tend to learn what to hunt. Researchers have found that kittens follow their mother's prey choices closely, and this early exposure often shapes adult prey specialization for the rest of a cat's life. A kitten introduced early to mice may grow into an adult cat with a lasting preference and skill for catching mice specifically, while a kitten raised around a different prey type develops an entirely different specialty. It is a little like a child who grows up in a household devoted to one particular cuisine and finds, even as an adult with the whole world of food available to them, a persistent pullback toward the flavors of that very first kitchen. The narrow, specific skill we discussed earlier in our journey, it turns out, often has a simple, tender origin. It begins with whatever a kitten's mother happened to bring home first. Fact 44. The toy that didn't actually help. Fact 44. Here is a genuinely surprising twist, one that quietly contradicts something almost every cat owner simply assumes to be true. A detailed study, tracking kittens into adulthood, examined several factors that might influence how skilled a cat eventually becomes at catching real prey. Both the presence of the mother during a kitten's early exposure to prey and direct hands-on experience with real prey as an adult clearly improved predatory competence. But object play, the classic image of a kitten pouncing joyfully on a toy, showed no measurable effect on adult hunting skill at all. Think of it like practicing a sport entirely through video games, building genuine enthusiasm and familiarity with the movements, and yet discovering that none of it quite prepares you for the unpredictable weight and resistance of the real thing. All that adorable, energetic play may matter enormously for a kitten's development in other ways, but when it comes to becoming a genuinely skilled hunter, the research suggests real experience is simply irreplaceable. Fact 45. A skill with a closing window. Fact 45. Scientists who tracked kittens week by week, from 4 weeks old all the way to 12, discovered something that looks very much like a hidden turning point folded into early development. Throughout this period, various measures of stalking, chasing, and pouncing were closely correlated with one another, moving together as a single, unified skill set. But somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks of age, those correlations quietly began to break down. The unified system of early kittenhood seems to reorganize itself into something more specific, more differentiated, no longer moving as one single block of behavior. Picture a single wide, braided river that, at a certain point downstream, gradually separates into several distinct, narrower channels, each one now flowing in its own particular direction. Somewhere in that quiet reorganization, a kitten's early general playfulness begins sorting itself into the more specialized behaviors it will carry for the rest of its life. Fact 46. When play splits into two roads. Fact 46. That same reorganization, researchers found, sends different types of play down genuinely different developmental roads entirely. Some patterns of kitten play became increasingly linked over time to the same underlying systems that control adult predatory behavior. Other patterns of play became linked instead to what researchers call agonistic behavior, the systems involved in social conflict and hierarchy among cats. What once looked like one single, joyful category, simply playing, gradually reveals itself to be at least two different rehearsals happening side by side. It is a little like watching young children at recess, all seemingly engaged in the same simple game, and only years later recognizing that some of them were quietly rehearsing competition, while others were rehearsing cooperation all along. A kitten pouncing on a sibling's tail, it turns out, may be practicing for a very different chapter of adult life than a kitten pouncing on a rolling ball. Fact 47. The late bloomers catch up. Fact 47. Not every kitten develops at the same pace, and here is a small, quietly hopeful detail buried in the research. Scientists comparing kitten performance to adult performance found that individual rankings within a litter were often maintained over time, meaning a kitten that was unusually skilled early tended to remain skilled later. But there was an important exception. Some individuals that scored poorly as young hunters were found, as adults, to have caught up entirely with their littermates, closing a gap that once looked significant. Think of a small group of children learning to read together, some picking it up almost instantly, others struggling at first, only to find, a few years later, that the entire group reads with roughly the same fluent ease. Falling behind early, in other words, does not appear to be a permanent sentence. Somewhere along the way, given enough time, many of the late bloomers simply, quietly arrive. Fact 48. A detail tucked into the litter. Fact 48. Here is a small, easily overlooked detail from that same research, tucked away in the numbers like a footnote most people never read. Between 8 and 12 weeks of age, male kittens made significantly more contact with objects during play than female kittens did. But this difference nearly disappeared whenever a litter happened to include another male kitten alongside a female. Something about the presence of a brother seemed to shift how a female kitten engaged with the world of toys and objects around her. It is a little like how a child's personality can shift subtly depending on which siblings happen to be in the room, each combination of family quietly nudging behavior in directions that would not have emerged the same way alone. Even something as small and playful as batting at a rolling toy, it turns out, is shaped a little by exactly who else happens to be sharing the nest. Fact 49. An old study, a small contradiction. Fact 49. Earlier in our journey, we learned that hunger tips the odds of an adult cat's kill, without ever being the deciding factor. A much older study, conducted in the 1930s, quietly complicates that picture even further. Researcher Xingyang Kuo, studying kittens directly, found that hunger appeared to have no measurable effect at all on a kitten's tendency to kill a rat, a genuinely different result from what researchers would later observe in adult cats. Think of it like a skill that only later in life becomes entangled with practical necessity. The way a child might draw purely for the joy of drawing, only gradually, as an adult, connecting that same skill to deadlines, income, or need. It is a small, curious thread worth simply noticing. Whatever eventually links hunger to hunting in an adult cat may not be present from the very beginning at all. It may be something that grows into place, quietly, alongside everything else a young cat is still learning about the world. Fact 50. A body not yet fully awake. Fact 50. Here is something easy to forget about the tiny, determined kittens we have been following through this chapter. When they are born, their eyes are sealed shut, their ears barely functional, their whole sensory world still folded closed, waiting to unfurl. Everything we have explored so far, the crouch, the pounce, the mother's careful lessons, unfolds gradually alongside an entire sensory system still coming online in real time. Before a kitten can ever truly hunt, its body first has to finish waking up to the world around it, the vibrations in the air, the precise position of a moving shadow, the exact distance to a trembling blade of grass. And what that fully awakened body eventually becomes, once every sense has finished opening, is genuinely extraordinary. Let your own senses rest now, heavy and soft, as we turn from the story of a kitten learning toward the quiet, remarkable machinery of a grown cat feeling its way through the dark. Part 6. The body built for the chase, new. Fact 51. A sense most people never think about. Fact 51. Look closely at a sleeping cat's face, and you will see them resting quietly against the fur, a set of long, delicate whiskers, easy to dismiss as simple decoration. They are not decoration at all. Scientifically known as vibrissae, these are specialized sensory organs, thicker than ordinary fur and rooted far more deeply, each one connected to a dense cluster of nerves wrapped in a donut-shaped structure beneath the skin. When a whisker so much as bends or brushes against something, that tiny movement travels directly and instantly to the central nervous system. Think of them less like hair and more like an entire second set of fingertips arranged around the face, capable of reading the world through the faintest possible touch, even the touch of moving air alone. Every cat curled up quietly tonight is, in a very real sense, still gently reading its surroundings through these remarkable threads, even fast asleep, even in the dark, even with its eyes fully closed. Fact 52. The blind spot right in front of the nose. Fact 52. Here is something wonderfully counterintuitive about a cat's famously sharp eyesight. Up close, it is not sharp at all. Cats are naturally far-sighted, and their vision blurs considerably for anything closer than roughly 30 centimeters, which happens to include almost the entire final stretch of a hunt, the last critical moment right before a bite. This is precisely where the whiskers step in. Researchers have found that facial whiskers help a cat judge the exact distance and precise bite point on prey held close to the face, and in one striking experiment, cats without whiskers repeatedly missed their prey entirely when attempting to pounce. Picture trying to thread a needle at the exact moment someone dims the lights to almost nothing, relying entirely on the practiced feel of your fingertips instead of your eyes to finish the job. The eyes get a hunt started from a distance, but it may be the whiskers, working right at the very edge of a cat's own nose, that actually finish it. Fact 53. Whiskers on the legs, not just the face. Fact 53. Most people assume whiskers belong only to a cat's face. In fact, cats also carry a specialized set of whiskers on the backs of their front legs, just above the paws, known as carpal whiskers. These leg whiskers serve a very particular purpose. Once a cat has already caught something, the carpal whiskers help detect the exact size, shape, and position of the prey held beneath its paws, along with any sudden movement that might signal an attempted escape. Think of it like a set of hidden sensors positioned exactly where a person's hands would be during a delicate, high-stakes task, quietly monitoring for the smallest shift or struggle, even when attention is focused elsewhere. Long after a hunt has technically already succeeded, this small, easily overlooked patch of fur on the back of a cat's legs is still quietly working, making sure nothing wriggles free at the very last second. Fact 54. Reading the wind itself. Fact 54. Perhaps the most remarkable whisker skill of all has nothing to do with touching anything directly. By flexing gently back and forth, a cat's whiskers can detect subtle shifts in air currents moving through a room, changes so faint that most other creatures, including us, would never notice them at all. This allows a cat to sense the presence, size, and rough position of nearby objects, and even approaching movement, without ever making physical contact with any of it. It is a little like navigating an unfamiliar room in total darkness by feeling the way the air itself changes shape around unseen furniture, an invisible map built entirely from movement in the space around you. This quiet, invisible radar is part of why a cat can slip gracefully through a dim, cluttered house at night without so much as brushing against a single object along the way. Fact 55. 24. Arranged like a ruler. Fact 55. There is a quiet symmetry hiding in a cat's whiskers that most people never pause to count. Cats typically have 24 whiskers on their muzzle, exactly 12 on each side, arranged with careful, even precision. The overall width these whiskers span is roughly equal to the width of a cat's own body, which is commonly thought to help a cat judge whether a narrow gap, a fence rail, a half-open door, a gap beneath furniture, is actually wide enough to pass through safely. Picture carrying, quite literally, built into your own face, a small and permanently attached measuring tape, always ready, always exactly calibrated to your own particular size. It is a beautifully simple piece of design, hidden in plain sight on every cat's face, quietly solving one of the most basic physical puzzles of a hunter's life, knowing, before committing your whole body to it, whether a space will actually let you through. Fact 56. A mood you can read at a glance. Fact 56. Whiskers do more than sense the world. They also, quite openly, reveal what a cat is feeling. When a cat is calm and relaxed, its whiskers tend to rest loosely out to the sides, neither pulled forward nor tucked back. During intense focus, excitement, or the earliest moments of a hunt, the whiskers fan out and bend forward, almost bristling with attention. And when a cat feels frightened or deeply unsure, the whiskers pull back tightly, bunching close against the cheeks, as though trying to make themselves as small and protected as possible. Think of it like a small, honest weather vane attached to either side of the face, constantly, quietly signaling which way the inner wind is blowing. Long before a cat's body language becomes obvious to an unfamiliar eye, its whiskers have usually already told the whole story for anyone patient enough to notice. Fact 57. The pain of an overcrowded bowl. Fact 57. Because whiskers are so sensitive, even something as ordinary as mealtime can occasionally become a source of quiet discomfort. Veterinarians describe a phenomenon sometimes called whisker fatigue or whisker stress, which can occur when a cat's whiskers repeatedly brush against the sides of a narrow, deep food bowl while eating. Some cats show a clear preference for wider, shallower dishes instead, the kind that let their whiskers rest freely, unbothered, on either side of the food. It is a little like the mild, nagging discomfort of wearing a coat sleeve that keeps brushing uncomfortably against your wrist all through dinner. Small, easy to overlook, and yet strangely persistent. A whisker built for detecting the faintest movement of prey in tall grass, it turns out, can be every bit as sensitive to something as gentle and ordinary as the rim of a dinner plate. Fact 58. A phantom feeling after loss. Fact 58. Here is one of the more tender, human-feeling details in this whole exploration of the senses. When a cat loses a whisker, whether from injury or from trimming, something curious can happen inside the brain itself. Veterinary researchers have described this as something like phantom whisker syndrome, in which the brain's internal map for that missing whisker continues to remain active, even though the whisker itself is simply gone. It closely resembles the phantom limb sensations that some humans experience after the loss of an arm or a leg, the mind still faithfully representing something the body no longer has. Think of it like a room in a house that has been quietly emptied out and yet somehow still appears, fully furnished, every time you walk past it in your memory. It is a small, strange reminder that the connection between a cat's body and a cat's mind runs deeper and more delicately than most of us ever pause to consider. Fact 59. Ears more powerful than we realize. Fact 59. If whiskers handle the world up close, a cat's ears handle everything happening much further away, and they do so with an ability that genuinely outperforms both our own hearing and even a dog's. A cat's hearing range extends from roughly 45 Hz all the way up to around 64 kHz, wider than the hearing range of dogs, and wider still than our own. Each external ear is controlled by around 32 individual muscles, allowing the two ears to rotate independently, up to nearly a full half circle each, pinpointing the exact direction a sound is coming from. In controlled testing, cats have been shown to distinguish between two separate sounds only 3 inches apart, from a full 3 feet away. Picture standing in a quiet room and being able to tell, without even turning your head, that two whispered voices are coming from two very slightly different places nearby. That precision is not a small advantage in the wild. It is often the very first clue a cat ever receives that something worth chasing has arrived. Fact 60. A conversation happening where humans cannot listen. Fact 60. Here is where a cat's remarkable hearing quietly opens a door into the next part of our journey. Some research suggests a cat's upper hearing range may extend well beyond 60 kHz, reaching frequencies far into what we call the ultrasonic range, sound so high in pitch that human ears cannot register it at all. This matters enormously because many small rodents communicate using exactly these kinds of ultrasonic calls, entire conversations happening constantly in a register completely invisible to us. A cat sitting motionlessly by a wall, seemingly doing nothing at all, may in fact be listening quite closely to something happening in a language we simply were never built to hear. It is a little like realizing that a quiet room you always assumed was silent has actually been humming this whole time, with a conversation just outside the edge of your own hearing. So let us follow that thread now, gently, out of the cat's own senses entirely, and into the hidden, careful world of the very creature on the other end of the hunt. Part 7. The Mouse's Side of the Story. Fact 61. An old fear even a lab mouse remembers. Fact 61. Every hunt, of course, has two sides, and so far we have spent this entire journey looking at only one of them. It is time we turned, gently, to consider the mouse. Researchers studying mice have found something that mirrors, almost exactly, what we discovered earlier about kittens who stalk prey they have never seen. When a rapidly looming dark shape passes overhead, mimicking the silhouette of a swooping hawk or owl, mice instinctively flee, immediately and without hesitation. Remarkably, this holds true even for laboratory mice that have spent their entire lives indoors, generations removed from any actual encounter with a real aerial predator. Think of it like a melody a person has never consciously heard, and yet somehow already knows the next note too, some inherited memory playing quietly underneath conscious awareness. The hunter is not the only one carrying instincts older than personal experience. The hunted carries them too, fully formed, patiently waiting, just beneath the surface of an ordinary, unremarkable little life. Fact 62. Reacting before thought has time to form. Fact 62. Just how fast does that ancient fear actually move? Researchers have measured it precisely, and the answer is almost too quick to fully imagine. Mice can begin a defensive reaction to a threatening stimulus in roughly 250 milliseconds, a span of time far shorter than it takes a human simply to consciously register what they have just seen. Even more remarkably, when researchers gave mice a choice between several different escape routes of varying length and angle, the mice consistently favored the shortest, most direct path to shelter, correctly, on their very first exposure to danger, without needing any prior experience of actually escaping anything at all. It is a little like already knowing, before you have ever needed to run from anything in your life, exactly which nearby doorway offers the fastest way out of a room. Escape, for a mouse, does not appear to be a skill learned through trial and error. It is a decision the body already knows how to make, long before real danger ever arrives to test it. Fact 63. The wall is not just a wall. Fact 63. Anyone who has ever watched a mouse dart across a room will have noticed something particular about the path it chooses. Almost never straight across open floor, almost always hugging close along the baseboard. This behavior, known to researchers as thigmotaxis, is a well-documented instinct in rodents, especially pronounced whenever a mouse feels anxious or exposed. Staying close to a vertical surface offers a felt sense of safety, reducing the amount of open, vulnerable space a mouse has to cross at any given moment. Picture walking through an unfamiliar, echoing hallway late at night, and noticing your own feet drifting instinctively closer to the wall, without ever consciously deciding to walk that way at all. For a cat lying in wait, this is not incidental information. It is a genuinely useful piece of prey psychology, the quiet, reliable knowledge of exactly where along a room's edges a hunt is most likely to unfold. Fact 64. A home too complicated to defend. Fact 64. Given the choice, mice show a strong and consistent preference for cluttered, structurally complex environments, spaces filled with bricks, boxes, furniture, anything that breaks up open ground into smaller, more defensible pieces. Researchers studying this preference found something wonderfully paradoxical tucked inside it. While complex, cluttered spaces do offer more protection from predators, they are also, ironically, far more difficult for a resident mouse to properly defend against other intruding mice, since pursuers can simply lose track of a target amid all that visual clutter. Think of it like a garden maze that keeps a wandering visitor pleasantly hidden from view, while also making it nearly impossible for the maze's own gardener to keep proper track of everyone currently wandering inside it. The very clutter that keeps a mouse safe from a hunting cat may be the same clutter that makes an entire hidden mouse population far harder to fully account for, or ever completely clear away. Fact 65. When a mouse chooses to deceive. Fact 65. Here, tucked away in a fairly recent and genuinely startling study, is one of the most sophisticated pieces of animal behavior in this entire journey, and it belongs entirely to the mouse. Researchers studying black-striped mice being pursued by another mouse observed something that looked remarkably like deliberate deception. Rather than fleeing in a straight, predictable line, the pursued mouse would move toward a nearby exit tube, then wait motionlessly nearby, carefully monitoring the position of its pursuer before slipping through the tube at precisely the moment its pursuer was turned the wrong way. Picture a person quietly stepping just out of a search party's direct line of sight, holding perfectly still, timing their final move to the exact instant no one happens to be looking. Researchers concluded this behavior could not be fully explained by simple instinct or basic learning alone. It appeared, instead, to be genuinely strategic, calculated in real time, based on a constantly shifting read of exactly where the danger currently was. Fact 66. Perspective taking in a creature the size of your thumb. Fact 66. What makes that deceptive maneuver even more remarkable is what it actually requires, cognitively, from a brain smaller than a human thumbnail. To choose the right hiding spot at the right moment, a mouse would essentially need to predict where its pursuer was most likely to search next, and position itself specifically outside of that expected search pattern. Researchers describing this behavior suggested it may represent an elementary form of perspective taking, a mouse briefly modeling, in some limited way, what another animal is likely to do. It is a little like a young child learning, for the very first time, that hiding somewhere obvious to themselves might still be genuinely invisible from someone else's different point of view. We rarely credit the mouse with much depth of mind at all, and yet, quietly, tucked into the margins of an escape from danger, something surprisingly close to real strategy appears to be unfolding. Fact 67. A fear that changes the body itself. Fact 67. The presence of a cat does not need to end in a chase at all to leave its mark on a mouse. Sometimes, scent alone is enough. Researchers have found that simply detecting the scent of a cat nearby can measurably lower reproductive capacity in mice, and in rats as well, without any physical encounter ever taking place. The mere possibility of danger, carried on the air, appears to impose a genuine biological cost, quietly altering the body's own priorities in response to risk alone. Think of it like how prolonged, chronic stress in a person can quietly affect the body in ways that have nothing directly to do with any single dramatic event. Simply the steady, background awareness that danger might, at any moment, be somewhere nearby. A cat, it seems, does not always need to hunt at all in order to change the world around it. Sometimes, simply existing nearby is already enough. Fact 68. The chase that almost never happens. Fact 68. And yet, for all of this elaborate mutual awareness between predator and prey, actual chases turn out to be far rarer than most people would ever guess. In one detailed urban study tracking feral cats and rats sharing the same enclosed space, researchers recorded 259 separate encounters between the two species over 79 days, sometimes with as many as 3 cats patrolling the very same area within a single day. Out of all those encounters, cats actually pursued a rat only 3 times. A full-grown urban rat, it turns out, is often simply too large and too capable of fighting back for most cats to risk the attempt at all. Picture 2 familiar neighbors who pass each other constantly, who clearly notice one another every single time, and yet who almost never actually speak. Most of what a cat's presence accomplishes in these dense urban settings is not really killing at all. It is simply, quietly, making the rats a little more careful about where and when they choose to move. Fact 69. 2 species that learn to live in the cracks together. Fact 69. It is worth remembering, near the end of this chapter devoted entirely to the mouse, that mice have their own long, quiet history of choosing human company, every bit as old and deliberate as the cats. Archaeological evidence shows house mice moving into human settlements roughly 14,500 years ago, a full 2,000 years before cats ever arrived on the scene at all. First drawn simply by shelter and warmth, only later by the promise of stored grain. In a very real sense, mice were the very first species to make the deliberate, patient decision to build a life alongside ours. Think of it like discovering that the smallest, quietest guest at a very old gathering was actually the very first one to arrive. Every part of tonight's story, the cat, the grain, the long partnership between our 2 species, ultimately traces back to this one small, easily overlooked creature, choosing, first, to stay. Fact 70. 2 ancient instincts, 1 changed world. Fact 70. So here we are, holding both halves of this ancient story at once. A predator carrying a complete, inherited hunting system, fully formed since before it ever needed it. A prey animal carrying an equally complete, inherited set of defenses, fast, strategic, and remarkably sophisticated for something so small. Both of these systems evolved together, shaped patiently against one another over an enormous stretch of time, long before either species had ever heard of a house, a sofa, or a sealed apartment door. But the world both of these ancient systems were built for has changed dramatically, and remarkably recently, in ways neither the cat nor the mouse ever had time to fully adjust to. Let your breathing settle a little deeper now, as we step forward together, out of this ancient, evolutionary standoff, and into the strange, quiet, modern world both animals now find themselves navigating side by side. Part 8. A world that stopped making prey. Fact 71. The bowl that changed everything. Fact 71. If we are looking for the single moment when the ancient bargain between cats and hunting truly began to loosen, it may not be a change in the cat at all. It may simply be the invention of a full, reliable bowl of food. For most of the shared history between cats and humans, the nutritional needs of a cat were not fully understood or properly met by whatever food people happened to provide. Complete, nutritionally balanced commercial cat food, capable of sustaining a cat with no hunting required at all, only really became well understood and widely available starting around the 1970s. Before that point, hunting was not simply an old instinct for most cats. It was, quietly, still a genuine necessity. Think of it like a long-standing family recipe, suddenly becoming unnecessary the moment a fully prepared meal becomes available at the press of a button. The old skill still remembered, simply no longer required. In evolutionary terms, this change happened only moments ago. The instinct never had any real chance to catch up. Fact 72. Most cats now live entirely indoors. Fact 72. Alongside that full and reliable bowl came another equally enormous shift, where cats actually spend their lives. In industrialized countries today, the majority of companion cats are raised largely or entirely indoors, a dramatic change from the farm cats, barn cats, and free-roaming village cats that made up most of feline history for thousands of years. Many modern cats will never once encounter an actual rodent, bird, or insect in the wild, uncontrolled way earlier generations of cats routinely did. Picture a skilled craftsman, trained carefully in a trade, passed down for generations, moving into a modern city where that particular trade is simply no longer needed anywhere nearby. The instinct has not gone anywhere, but the entire landscape it was built to operate within has, in the span of just a few generations, been almost completely redrawn. Fact 73. The cat who never meets a mouse still wants to. Fact 73. Here is a genuinely surprising detail buried in the research, one that quietly turns a common assumption on its head. You might expect that cats confined entirely indoors, with no access to real prey at all, would gradually lose interest in anything resembling a hunt. Researchers found precisely the opposite. Indoor-only cats consistently showed more inclination toward predatory play than cats who had regular outdoor access to real prey. Lacking any real outlet for the instinct did not weaken the desire behind it. If anything, it seemed to leave that desire a little more restless, a little more eager for any substitute it could find. Think of it like a skill or a passion someone genuinely loves, made suddenly unavailable, only to find the craving for it grows sharper, not softer, the longer it goes unpracticed. That restless, purely indoor hunger for the hunt may explain a great deal about why even the calmest house cat sometimes seems almost desperate for a dangling shoelace at 11 o'clock at night. Fact 74. A world rebuilt to keep mice out. Fact 74. Even for cats who do have some access to the outdoors, the world itself has quietly been redesigned in ways that make a genuine encounter with real prey far less common than it once was. Modern homes are built with tighter seals, fewer gaps, and sturdier construction than the old farmhouses and grain stores that first drew wildcats toward human settlements. Food is stored in sealed containers rather than left exposed in open sacks, and where rodents do appear, poisons and traps are deployed quickly and efficiently, often before a resident cat ever has the chance to notice them at all. Picture an entire hunting ground, slowly, carefully sealed shut, one small improvement in human comfort and cleanliness at a time, none of it intended as an insult to the cat, and yet each one quietly closing another door. The stage the ancient instinct was built to perform on has, brick by careful brick, simply been dismantled. Fact 75. The war that never quite ends. Fact 75. And yet, despite all of that careful sealing and poisoning and trapping, rodents themselves have not actually disappeared from our cities at all. If anything, in many places, the opposite is happening. Researchers tracking long-term rat population trends across major cities around the world found that 11 out of 16 cities studied showed significant increases in rat numbers over time, even as pest control spending and effort continued to rise. Warmer city temperatures and denser human populations appear to be extending the seasons in which rats can comfortably breed and forage. It is a little like discovering that a battle everyone assumed was slowly being won has, quietly and almost invisibly, actually been shifting in the opposite direction the entire time. The rodents have not vanished, they have simply become better hidden, better protected by the very same modern infrastructure that was designed, in theory, to keep them away from us entirely. Fact 76. A better diet, a quieter hunter. Fact 76. If the instinct to hunt cannot easily be removed, researchers have found that it can, at least, be gently softened, and the method is surprisingly simple. In a carefully controlled study, cats given a higher protein, grain-free diet brought home 36% fewer captured animals than cats on their usual food, relative to a comparison group. Something about a more complete, satisfying diet appears to quiet the underlying motivation to hunt, not by removing the instinct entirely, but by meeting whatever nutritional gap may have been quietly fueling it. Think of it like a persistent craving for something specific finally settling, once the body has actually received whatever it was subtly missing all along. It is a small, hopeful detail for anyone who has ever worried about a beloved cat's hunting habits. Sometimes, the gentlest solution is simply a better bowl of food. Fact 77. 5 minutes a day. Fact 77. A second intervention from that same body of research turned out to be even simpler, requiring nothing more than a small daily investment of shared time. Households that introduce just 5 to 10 minutes of daily object play, actively engaging a cat with a wand toy or similar moving object, saw a 25% drop in the number of animals their cats brought home, compared to cats who received no such structured play at all. Picture a small, brief ritual, barely long enough to finish a cup of tea, quietly meeting a need that might otherwise go looking for satisfaction somewhere far less convenient, like a windowsill at 3 in the morning. It does not need to be elaborate, it simply needs to happen, consistently, offering the hunting instinct a small, safe outlet before it goes looking for a real one elsewhere. Fact 78. The puzzle that backfired. Fact 78. Not every attempt at enrichment worked the way researchers expected, and this particular twist is worth sitting with for a moment. Puzzle feeders, a popular tool designed to make mealtime more mentally engaging and satisfying for cats, were also tested in the same research. Rather than reducing hunting behavior, households using puzzle feeders saw hunting-related captures increase by 33% compared to cats without them. It is a little like offering someone a small, engaging puzzle related to a craving they were already trying to quiet, and discovering, to everyone's surprise, that solving the puzzle only sharpens their appetite for the real thing even further. Not every kind of stimulation soothes the same underlying hunger. Some, quite unexpectedly, seem to feed it instead. Fact 79. The bell that never really worked. Fact 79. One more small myth is worth gently retiring here, since so many cat owners have relied on it for years without ever quite knowing whether it actually helped. The same careful research testing various interventions found that cat bells, long recommended as a simple way to warn prey of an approaching cat, showed no discernible effect on hunting success at all. Whatever quiet advantage a warning jingle was supposed to offer prey animals, in practice, it simply did not measurably change the outcome. Think of it like a widely trusted piece of advice, passed along faithfully for generations, that turns out, once someone finally bothers to test it carefully, to have never quite done what everyone assumed. Sometimes even our best intentions toward an old instinct rest on solutions that sound reasonable, and simply are not. Fact 80. A body still waiting for dawn and dusk. Fact 80. Even after all of this, one thing has remained remarkably resistant to change: a cat's internal clock. Across generations of indoor living, cats have continued to show a natural rhythm of activity that peaks around dawn and dusk, the exact hours when their ancestral prey, birds and rodents alike, was traditionally most active. But researchers have also noticed something gentler happening alongside that old rhythm. Indoor cats, more than their outdoor counterparts, tend to gradually shift their activity to align more closely with their owner's own daily schedule, quietly syncing their ancient clock to a distinctly modern one. Picture an old, deeply ingrained habit slowly, gently bending itself to accommodate an entirely new kind of household without ever fully disappearing underneath the adjustment. And that quiet bending, That willingness to adapt without ever fully forgetting brings us naturally to a question we have circled several times tonight without yet fully answering. Why do some individual cats adapt and hunt and adjust so differently from one another in the first place? Let us rest there for a while now, gently, with the individual cats themselves, the specialists, and the indifferent ones alike, each one carrying this same ancient story in a slightly different, deeply personal way. Part 9. No two hunters alike. Fact 81. The feline 5. Fact 81. If instinct is universal and skill can be shaped by circumstance, there remains one more ingredient in this story we have not yet properly examined: simple, individual personality. Researchers surveying the behavior of nearly 3,000 pet cats identified 5 consistent personality traits that reliably distinguish one cat from another: neuroticism, extroversion, dominance, impulsiveness, and agreeableness. Scientists have nicknamed this framework the Feline 5, drawing a deliberate parallel to the 5 broad personality traits long used to describe human character. Think of it a little like discovering that cats, in their own quiet way, come with recognizable temperaments too, some naturally bold and curious, others naturally cautious and reserved, patterns consistent enough that researchers could actually measure and compare them. And it turns out these particular traits do far more than simply describe a cat's personality in general. They appear to directly shape one of the oldest questions in this entire journey: which cats actually hunt? Fact 82. Boldness and curiosity decide more than ancestry. Fact 82. Across multiple studies surveying thousands of cat owners, one pattern emerged with striking consistency. Cats rated by their owners as highly extroverted, curious, active, and inquisitive, or as low in neuroticism, meaning calm and confident rather than anxious, were significantly more likely to hunt and bring prey home than other cats. In other words, temperament, not breed, not size, not even necessarily raw physical skill, appears to be one of the strongest predictors of whether a cat engages with its hunting instinct at all. Picture 2 people with access to the exact same hobby, the same equipment, the same opportunity, where the only real difference separating an enthusiast from someone who simply never bothers is a basic difference in temperament, boldness, and curiosity. The instinct waits patiently inside every cat, in other words, but it takes a particular kind of personality to actually reach out and answer it. Fact 83. Personality decides whether, not how much. Fact 83. Here is an important nuance researchers were careful to add to that picture. While personality clearly predicted whether a cat hunted at all, it did not predict how many prey a hunting cat actually caught. That second question, the sheer scale of hunting among cats who do hunt, turned out to be explained far better by something else entirely: age. Younger cats consistently brought home significantly more prey than older cats, regardless of how bold, curious, or outgoing their individual personality happened to be. It is a little like discovering that while enthusiasm decides whether someone takes up a demanding physical hobby in the first place, It is youth and energy, not passion alone, that decides how far they actually go with it. Two very different forces then, quietly shaping the same behavior from two entirely different directions. Fact 84. A skill some cats simply perfected. Fact 84. Among cats who do hunt regularly, researchers observing real hunting attempts found genuinely staggering differences in raw skill from one individual to the next. In one detailed study of hunting efficiency, some cats successfully caught rodents in 83 to 100% of their attempts, an extraordinarily high success rate. Other cats, hunting the exact same type of prey under similar conditions, succeeded far less often, sometimes only occasionally, despite putting in genuine effort. Think of two people learning the same instrument from the same teacher, one eventually playing with effortless precision, the other still fumbling through the basics after years of honest practice. Genuine mastery, it turns out, is not evenly distributed even among cats who clearly want to hunt and clearly try. Some simply become extraordinarily good at it. Others remain earnest, willing amateurs their entire lives. Fact 85. Every cat has a signature prey. Fact 85. Perhaps the most charming discovery in this entire body of research is just how personal a cat's hunting habits can become. In a detailed study tracking 26 cats that regularly brought prey home, researchers found clear individual specialization. 8 cats specialized almost entirely in small birds. 5 specialized in lizards. 4 became specifically skilled at catching black rats. 3 focused on larger birds. Only 6 of the 26 cats hunted a broad, generalist mix of prey types. Picture an entire neighborhood of chefs, all given access to the very same market, and yet each one quietly, consistently gravitating toward one particular ingredient, one particular dish, until it becomes something like a personal signature. A cat's hunt, it turns out, is rarely random. Somewhere along the way, most serious hunters quietly settle into a specialty entirely their own. Fact 86. Loyalty even when the reward runs thin. Fact 86. That same research revealed something almost stubborn about a specialist cat's devotion to its chosen prey. Even when a cat's preferred prey type became scarce or hard to find, specialist cats often continued targeting that same prey rather than switching to something more abundant and conveniently available nearby. This persistence, researchers noted, can actually put rare or already declining prey populations at particular risk, since a dedicated specialist will keep hunting them long after a more flexible predator would have simply moved on. It is a little like a person with one deeply loved, very specific hobby, who keeps pursuing it faithfully even once it has become genuinely inconvenient, simply because nothing else quite satisfies the same particular pull. Specialization, in other words, comes with its own quiet cost. A cat's devotion to its favorite hunt does not fade simply because that hunt has become harder to find. Fact 87. Where you live still matters. Fact 87. Beyond personality and specialization, a cat's actual circumstances continue to shape how much of its instinct ever gets expressed at all. Research has consistently found that non-pedigree cats tend to hunt more than pedigree breed cats, and that cats living in rural or suburban settings hunt considerably more than cats living in dense urban environments, largely reflecting how much genuine access to wildlife each of these different living situations actually provides. Think of it like a talented athlete whose actual level of activity still depends enormously on which neighborhood, which facilities, which opportunities happen to surround them, regardless of their raw underlying ability. The instinct itself does not change from one home to the next, but the world surrounding each particular cat still quietly decides how much room that instinct ever really gets to breathe. Fact 88. The cats who simply never answer the call. Fact 88. Earlier in our journey, inside the quiet laboratories of predatory neuroscience, we met a small group of cats, researchers described bluntly as genetic non-killers, individuals in whom the predatory pattern simply never activated, even under deliberate scientific provocation. Here, among all this research into ordinary household hunting behavior, that same group reappears in gentler form. Some cats, regardless of personality testing, regardless of outdoor access, regardless of age or opportunity, simply never seem to engage with hunting in any meaningful way at all, content instead to watch the world go by from a sunny windowsill. It is a little like meeting someone with every possible advantage, every opportunity, every encouragement towards some particular pursuit, who nonetheless remains genuinely, peacefully uninterested, for reasons that may simply live too deep to fully explain. Some cats hunt because circumstance allows it. A rare few, it seems, simply never will, no matter what circumstance provides. Fact 89. 2 cats, 1 mouse, 2 different lives. Fact 89, which brings us, finally, to the small, quietly funny truth sitting at the very center of this entire journey. Take 2 ordinary house cats, raised in similar homes, fed the same food, given the same casual access to the occasional real mouse. One of them becomes, almost effortlessly, a genuinely proficient hunter, striking with the same 80 to 100% success rate we discussed earlier, treating every small scurrying movement as an irresistible, focused calling. The other cat, watching that exact same mouse dash boldly across the very same kitchen floor, will sometimes simply lift its head, observe the whole event with mild, detached curiosity, and then calmly return to its nap, as though the entire matter clearly belonged to someone else's job description. Both cats carry the identical ancient toolkit we explored across this whole story, the same inherited crouch, the same pre-wired killing grip, the same complete neurological machinery built by millions of years of evolution, and yet one shows up for the job, and the other, quite peacefully, does not. Fact 90. The same blueprint, endless variations. Fact 90. So here is where all of this individual variation quietly settles: personality, age, upbringing, opportunity, even some small, unexplained spark deep within the nervous system itself, all of it shapes whether any particular cat ever becomes a hunter at all. But underneath every single one of these differences, Whether wildly enthusiastic or gently indifferent, every cat is still built from exactly the same ancient evolutionary blueprint, the very same one carried by every member of the wider cat family, from the smallest house cat to the largest predator prowling anywhere on Earth. Think of it like an enormous, sprawling family, filled with wildly different personalities, and yet every single member still sharing, quietly, the very same blood. And that shared blood, as we are about to discover in our final chapter tonight, runs closer and deeper than almost anyone watching a cat curled up on a couch would ever think to guess. Part 10. Tiger in the Room. Fact 91. A family tree barely 10 million years old. Fact 91. To close our journey tonight, we need to pull back, gently, one final time, further than the grain stores, further than the kitten's first lesson, further even than the wild ancestor we met back at the very beginning of this story. Every cat alive today, from the smallest house cat curled on a pillow to the largest tiger moving quietly through a distant forest, descended from a single common ancestor that lived somewhere between 8 and 11 million years ago. In evolutionary terms, that is a remarkably short span of time for a single family to spread into so many different shapes and sizes, while still keeping so much of its original design intact. Think of it like one especially well-drawn architectural blueprint, so effective at its original purpose that centuries of builders across the world simply kept using it, adjusting the scale here and there, but never needing to redesign the basic structure at all. The cat, it seems, got the essential design right early and simply never needed to start over. Fact 92. 95.6%. Fact 92. Here, finally, is the number we quietly promised you back at the very beginning of tonight's journey. When scientists sequenced the full genome of a tiger and compared it directly to the genome of an ordinary domestic cat, they found the two shared 95.6% of their DNA. For context, humans and gorillas, a comparison most people already find intuitively close, share only about 94.8%, despite having diverged from a common ancestor around a similar span of time ago. The tiger and the house cat, in other words, are genetically closer to one another than we are to some of our own nearest living relatives. Picture the difference between two distant cousins who happen to share a surprising number of small mannerisms, and discovering, almost impossibly, that they are actually closer family than that. The enormous, roaring predator and the small, purring one asleep on your lap are, biologically speaking, remarkably close kin indeed. Fact 93. The same architecture, built at two different scales. Fact 93. That genetic closeness goes even deeper than simple percentages. When researchers examined the overall structure of the tiger and house cat genomes, the underlying architecture, the way genetic material is organized and repeated throughout, they found it to be remarkably similar between the two species, far more similar than comparable structures found between more distantly related primates. It is a little like discovering that two buildings of wildly different size, a small cottage and an enormous manor house, were nonetheless framed using exactly the same underlying blueprint, simply scaled up or down to fit. The house cat is not merely a distant, diluted echo of something wilder. In a very real genetic sense, it is built from precisely the same architectural plan as the largest cats alive on Earth today. Fact 94. Genes written only in cats. Fact 94. Digging deeper still, researchers comparing multiple big cat genomes to the domestic cat found something even more specific. A shared set of roughly 1,376 genetic changes present throughout the cat family and not found in any other animal group studied. In other words, there appears to be a genuine, identifiable genetic signature of what it means, quite literally, to be a cat, a shared inheritance running quietly through every member of this family, connecting the tiger, the lion, the snow leopard, and the small creature curled up asleep somewhere near you tonight. Think of it like a distinctive family trait, a particular laugh or gesture, passed down faithfully through every single branch of an enormous, sprawling family tree, no matter how differently each branch eventually grew. Every cat, in some quiet, deeply written way, still carries the same signature. Fact 95. A white coat, borrowed from the same old gene. Fact 95. Here is a small, almost playful detail tucked into all of this deep genetic research. When scientists studied the genes responsible for unusually pale, white coats among big cats, they found that both white tigers and white lions carry mutations in the very same gene, called TYR, that is also responsible for white coloring in some domestic cats. The exact mutations differ slightly between species, each one arriving at whiteness by a slightly different path, but the same basic genetic mechanism, quietly inherited across the whole cat family, seems to have been available for evolution to draw upon at every single scale, from the smallest housecat to the largest tiger. It is a little like discovering that an unusual family trait, showing up rarely and unpredictably across many different branches of a family tree, always traces back to the very same small piece of shared inheritance. Even a cat's rarest, most striking coloring, it turns out, is simply another quiet echo of that same enormous family. Fact 96. A predator that never needed to change jobs. Fact 96. There is one more thread worth gently pulling before we let this story finally rest. Unlike dogs, who were shaped and reshaped over thousands of years into an enormous range of specific working roles, herding, guarding, retrieving, companionship alone, the domestic cat's basic role in the world has remained almost entirely unchanged since the very beginning of our shared history. Researchers studying this pattern have described the cat, somewhat playfully, as a predator for hire, an animal that essentially never needed to be reshaped into something new, because the original arrangement, a skilled, independent hunter tolerated and appreciated near human homes, simply continued working exactly as it always had. Think of it like a single, specialized profession that never needed reinventing, quietly continuing on, almost entirely unchanged, generation after generation, long after the trades and roles around it had transformed many times over. Fact 97. Independence was never really rejection. Fact 97. That unchanged role helps explain something people sometimes misread as coldness in a cat's character, its famous, quiet independence. Because a cat's fundamental identity as a hunter never had to be renegotiated the way a dog's many working roles did, cats developed real affection, sociability, and attachment toward humans as something added gently on top of that older identity, rather than something that replaced it entirely. The bond is genuine. It has simply never required a cat to fully set aside the independent hunter it has always been underneath. Picture an old, deeply capable friend who chooses to spend time with you freely, out of real affection, without that friendship ever requiring them to give up who they fundamentally are. A cat's love, in other words, is never a substitute for its wildness. It sits quietly alongside it the whole time, exactly as it always has. Fact 98. The tiger curled at the foot of the bed. Fact 98. So here, at last, is the image we promised you at the very start of tonight's journey, the one we asked you to simply hold in mind and wait for. Somewhere near you tonight, perhaps at the foot of the bed, perhaps curled quietly in another room, there may be a small, familiar shape, breathing slowly, twitching now and then. And within that shape, genetically, structurally, 95.6% of the way there, is a tiger, folded down gently to the size of a cushion. Think of it exactly like that, if it helps you drift tonight. Not an ordinary house pet at all, but an enormous, ancient predator, patiently, gently compressed into something small enough to rest safely in your lap. The wildness was never removed. It was simply, lovingly, scaled all the way down. Fact 99. Every sleeping cat still carries the whole story. Fact 99. Let us gather, gently, everything this small sleeping shape has carried with it through tonight's long journey, the grain stores of the ancient fertile crescent, and a slower, stranger domestication than anyone once believed, a brain built from separate, cooperating parts, capable of wanting a hunt long before it can properly finish one. A mother's first patient lesson, given to a kitten only a few weeks old, a whisker reading the shape of the air itself, a mouse, somewhere, carrying its own equally ancient and sophisticated defenses, a world quietly rebuilt, without asking permission, around an instinct that never got the message to stop. And underneath every bit of that long, layered history, one small, individual creature, entirely its own, choosing, in its own particular way, whether or how to answer the ancient call still humming quietly inside it. All of that resting, right now, in one small, breathing shape nearby. Fact 100. You are the ones who chose each other. Fact 100. And so we arrive, gently, at the very end of the hunt. It was never really about mice at all, not entirely. It was about an old, patient story, one where a wild, independent creature looked at human life and quietly decided, all on its own, that this arrangement might be worth staying for. Nobody tamed the cat. The cat, in its own time, on its own terms, simply chose to remain. And it is still choosing, every single day, in the small, ordinary moments neither of you think to notice, in the way it follows you quietly from room to room. in the way it settles without hesitation into the warm space beside you, in the trust it offers a species it never truly needed to trust at all. So if there is a small, sleeping shape near you tonight, let yourself simply rest beside it a little while longer. You are not just its home. You are, in some very old and very real sense, still the reason a tiger, folded gently down to the size of a cushion, feels safe enough to close its eyes completely and sleep. So let all of that settle now, soft and unhurried, the way the last light settles at the end of a long, quiet day. There is nothing left to remember from tonight. No grain store, no mouse, no gene, no single fact you need to hold on to on purpose. Let it all simply drift, gently, the way a cat's own thoughts might drift, somewhere between waking and sleep, warm, unbothered, entirely at peace. Somewhere near you, or somewhere in your memory, that small tiger is still curled quietly, still breathing slow, still perfectly, completely safe. You are safe too. You are held. You are exactly where you need to be tonight. Let your body grow heavy now. Let your thoughts grow quiet. There is no hunt left to finish, no story left to follow, nothing left to do at all, except rest. Sleep now, gently, dear listener. And whenever you wish to wander back into these small, quiet corners of the world again, this channel and this story will still be here, waiting patiently, exactly like an old cat by a familiar window. Good night.